Greetings, this is Silent James. I'm working on a Distiller watercolor today, but a few of my friends have remarked that some of these videos are actually helpful for them as far as like watercolor technique or drawing techniques, so I wanted to use this video to talk a little bit about my thought process, why I make certain decisions, and show a little bit of the tools, and then I'll begin the watercolor. So before I start, I basically have a few things ready. Water for the watercolor, paper towels to dry things, or wipe your brush or fix any mistakes on the paper. I always have my drinking water near my watercolor water. It's very dangerous, don't do that. My brushes, most of them are watercolor brushes. Basically, most of the time I'll start with the background and work towards the foreground as far as coloring goes, and usually that's because the background will be a paler tone usually, or not as saturated, usually not dark. And then the figures in the front, like his suit is going to be very dark, so that's going to be probably the last thing I do. And the reason for that is because if you start out pale and then you work up darker colors, more saturated colors, if you bleed from the pale that you worked at before, your next color is darker, so it will be able to cover over any bleed from that to here. But if you work the opposite way, if I did the suit first in like a dark watercolor, and then tried to do a lighter, paler color next to it, if it pulls any of the color from here, when I put it next to it, if the water pulls it, the darkness, you won't be able to cover that up. So I hope that makes sense. That's why I call it pale to dark, but it's, lightest tone to darkest tone, but it's also palest to most saturated. So that's like basically my thought process. But I'm starting with the pink for the background. And for these first washes, they're usually pretty light, and and then the smoke here that'll be coming out will be blue, but I might include some of the background. I might put a wash first, because then if I put the blue over that, it'll really look like the smoke is over the pink wall, because you can see through smoke, the hazy atmosphere and stuff like that. Okay, let's give this a try. I don't know why I'm a little nervous today. I'm usually not. If you're working light to dark, if you go over the edges like I just did there, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to be going over that with a darker color. So your first layer, don't be afraid. Just get it down, and I don't know, a lot of effects, it kind of has to be dry before you actually get the effect. You'll start to think strategically, where you'll know what areas you need to cover quickly, and then what, like here, this started to dry a little bit, so I should have done this first before I moved on to what I just did. This part is going to be covered with the blue of the smoke, so it's not that big a deal if it's not even. I'm never really going for even anyway when I work, so it's quite alright. But yeah, because I know all of this will be darker, it's okay if I make little mistakes here and there and go over certain parts. It's okay. And again, this is just what works for me. Something else might work for you. I don't know. The one thing I do want to do is I want to soften a little bit this edge in the bottle, because it's not really, I don't know what I'm going to do with this part. So what I do is you take a little water, and then you just sort of rub the edges to make it soft. I forgot to mention, so most, all my good techniques I pretty much learned from Esther, my friend Esther. All props to her. If you enjoy this video, you enjoy her. But yeah, I'll usually have two brushes in my hand. One with the watercolor on it, and one that just has water on it to blend. And to do a smoke effect, what I'll do is I'll put down some water around the center, and then go on the outside with the color that you're using, and then you'll see it'll bleed it'll bleed into the center. And then I'll take the brush, the one with the water on it, and just put some more water, and then put the color on the edges. This is to give like a smoky effect. And then if it goes over it, you know, that looks pretty good. But if you want to, you can just pat it dry if you want more of the clear in the center, you know. But yeah, this is pretty much how you get like a smoky effect. But because we put the pink down in the center, it's nice because it has the pink effect on, like wherever basically you're not putting the color, it's gonna have that pink background. So it's pretty cool. And in fact, the smoke actually looks good going over the bat. So maybe I'll leave it and just I'll leave it over it. Who knows? My favorite thing about watercolor are the I don't want to say mistakes, but the things you didn't intend, because it's like a surprise for you. It's really nice. You can add some dark here and there, and that will just continue to bleed. So don't add too much water, like put mostly pigment when you do this, because the more water you add, the more it will pull up what you've already done. So yeah, so I'm just going to add a little bit to the edges just to keep giving it that puffy, really pretty like watercolor effect. But always be thinking like where do you want the most focus? And that should be where the highest contrast is in the piece. And if you want to too, you can always stamp a little bit out, like, you know, and it can actually give it a cool texture. Let's see, like the texture of the paper towel. So like, see, this is already sort of drying, but you know, if you want to give a little bit of texture. And like here, I don't want this much saturation here, so I'm gonna kind of, and just be careful you keep turning the paper, because if you just wipe the dark spot and then you might put the dark spot back on your piece. So yeah, some effects here and there. Like, this can even go to like the very center of the thing. But I like that. I like this effect that it does. So yeah, you decide where you want to use it, how much you want to use it. It's up to you. And really, cloud effects and stuff, it's like, it's seriously whatever you want to do. There's no rule. Like this is where you're free, so do whatever you want here. Go nuts. Like, so yeah, if you want to do some more of this, you can just do it like that. I wonder on the microphone if this is like a nice sound or because usually it's like pretty loud. But okay, so now I pretty much have the background type stuff done. I'm gonna start working on the figures, and again I'll work, try to work light to dark. Sometimes I do something before I shouldn't have, but it's okay. It'll be fine. And just so you know, not every single thing that's happened so far has been completely planned, but I'm very happy with it so far, so hopefully I don't mess it up. But yeah, so these are like, I'm a big fan of James Ensor, so these remind me of like James Ensor type skeletons. And I'll try to work left to right so that my hand doesn't See, this is a little bit too dark, but so that my hand doesn't touch anything that's wet. But yeah, so color this in. And then for creatures and skin and stuff like that, it can be blotchy, you know, it can be whatever you want. Anything goes with creatures. That's something I really love. And this whole Distiller project, it's been one of the most fun series I've ever done. So thank you, Andy and Aaron and the Distiller crew. Sometimes the watercolor will be so saturated that it will cover up the lines. And if that happens, just let it dry, and then once it's dry, you can go over the lines again. So never be afraid. Like, and plus, while you're working, you really don't have time to fret on things, so you have to work quickly. So that's another good thing about watercolor. It really doesn't let you have any freakouts. Like, yeah, it's hard to tell, but this one has like a kangaroo pouch right here, and there's like a little baby ghoul inside. And then yeah, because my work is linear, I can work in sections, like, you know, do the arm first, and then that way if anything dries, it's okay because the edges are lines. So I hope all of this is not only making sense, but I hope, like, I don't know, maybe it gives you some ideas for a project to work on. Because these techniques, even though I'm painting monsters, like, these techniques can be used for anything, you know. It just depends on what effect you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve like a soft effect, then, you know, you can do something like what I did with the color bleeding. And then for flat areas, you can just do the color flat, like I'm doing right now. So, you know, you just have to decide what you want to do with each part of it. That's it. And then you just have to be patient. You just have to let things dry, you know. Let this dry before you work next to it. Like, see, these are dry, so now I'll work on that. Before you do a color, you can test it out. Like, you like put it down here and see, oh, that's what the color is. I don't know, you probably can't even see it. Oh, that's what the color is going to look like. So before you put it down, you can test it outside your piece. Like, that looks too green to me, so I'm going to add some brown. And do that. Yeah, that's exactly the color I want. So you test it out, and then when your brush starts to drag like that, if you're not going for like a dry brush technique, then just, you know, that's when you dip your brush in the watercolor. But dry brush is good for, you know, it's not good for a first coat, obviously, but it's good for texture on top of some, like a base coat that you've already done. So, like, you know, now that I put the skin down on this creature here, if I wanted to, I can do a dry brush over its body, to do some texture and stuff like that. I really love the sound of, like, the watercolor brush on watercolor paper. It's very delightfully soothing. See, this I should have put down before I put down the background color, because you can see some of the colors creeping in, but it's a creature and it's hair, and, you know, it's okay to have mistakes. Like, you know, you're the boss. Like, you're the boss here, so as long as you're having fun and as long as you like the way it looks in the end, it doesn't matter. And honestly, at the end, usually the mistakes are the thing you like the most about the piece. Like the way something dried weird or whatever, that's usually what you end up liking the best. I don't want the eye to be drawn over here in this corner, so I don't really want a lot of contrast. So if you have white over here, it's going to really stand out. cool. As the piece goes on, it's like the more and more you get into like the finishing touches, the more actually I enjoy it. So it's like the beginning stages is just kind of like get the washes down and like try to get the effects you want. But then now it's like you're adding little details. This is like to me the funnest part. So yay! And then things that are far away, you really don't want to make them the tone too dark. You want to make them more faded. So you just add more water to your color. So that is way in the distance. So the cool thing is it'll leave the smoke over it that I did already, and then it will be its own color back there. So, but then ones that are closer, I'll do a little bit darker. So these ones are far away. You do them light. I have this song stuck in my head, this Devo song from, I think it was called The Men Who Make the Music. Did any of you see that video from the 70s? And there's a part where they go into the record label's office, Rod the Man, and he's playing this song called "You Didn't Know I Was a Midget." I have that song stuck in my head. It's a very weird song to have stuck in your head. But yeah, if any of you have, if any of you are Devo fans, which there's a good chance you are, yeah, I recommend. It's called, I believe it's called The Men Who Make the Music. I saw it when I was in junior high? No, high school? I can't remember, but it had a huge effect on me. Got a surprise from my honey, got a message from my girl. When she picked up a pen from beside her bed and wrote me scribble notes. She was coming back to see me, she was visiting real soon. Get up on the old white moon and leave this cold white plume. Wow. So when I did this part, I noticed that it sort of looks like an apple, like with the core here. So I'm gonna do like a Granny Smith like apple color here. So I'll have like the light coming from, I don't know, the center area or something to draw attention to the center. But yeah, even if you're doing fantastical things, like it's good to keep that stuff in mind because it'll add realism to what you're doing. This dude has 3 nostrils, by the way. I don't know if you noticed, but that's, you know, you gotta do it. Like, you get the chance to do 3 nostrils, why not? See, I don't like what I just did, so I'm gonna try and wipe it out. I sort of lost the shape of the nose there, and I don't like that, so then when you let it dry, you can just go over it again the way you wanted it to. So what I meant to do is have this shadow underneath the nose, like that. So keep it on the side here and underneath. There we go. So I have a little bit too much water on this brush right now. So this is probably going to dry very light, which I don't like, so I'm going to try to pull some of the water. And also the brush I'm using is way too big. Alright, let's stop this madness. Yeah. I like to keep it real with this video. I'm not always right. and I don't always know what the right thing to do, and I make mistakes. So, but yeah, I like to keep the fur flying here. So yeah, with fur and with anything that, like, you know, you can just be very loose with the shading, and it will dry, like, it'll give you like a fur type effect. And then I want to do like some dry brush here. So you see that the brush is dry, that's why they call it that, and you just sort of scrape it against the paper. It's like you put a little bit of pigment on it, and then you just sort of like drag it. It's not an exact science, and it doesn't always work, but when it does, it looks really nice. Just want to put a little bit of texture here and there on these creatures. Like, I want your school. I need your school. Any Misfits fans? When I was younger, that was like, everyone was crazy about the Misfits. Oh my god. I used to go to a lot of punk shows, and like, without fail, every show somebody would cover a Misfits song. Every set, every show. But you know, when Danzig was in the group, there's some catchy tunes. Like, actually, this was inspired by 20 Eyes in my head. So, like, I mean, there isn't 20 here, but maybe there is around the sides. See, some parts I want to be soft, some edges I want to be hard, so it's like, you just play around a little bit. There's no right or wrong. And then one of my favorite things to do is like put this like tartar buildup, and then we'll do this going this way. I could follow the shape of the jacket. I mean, that's what it would do in real life, but I like to make things look flat sometimes, so I don't mind, like, I don't mind that it's not lifelike or whatever, like, you know what I'm saying? As long as it gives the effect, I'm happy. So, and just so you know, my general game plan was I was going to make the monsters green, the smoke blue, and the background pink. But a lot of these details I'm just coming up with on the fly. So it's like, did I plan to have yellow claws? No. So I'm not crazy about this bright yellow all over the place there. I think I might wipe it up a little bit. I think it's a little bit too distracting. So I'm just gonna go over it with a clean brush and then pat it down. And you'll see it'll get paler. It's just way too saturated. It's drawing way too much attention over here, and then there's so many of them, you know. So yeah, that looks much better. So yeah, I think I'm gonna push this shadow more to the edge because I don't want this arm standing out too much. There we go. This is like when the core starts to turn brown on the apple. And then go in with like, so I want like the most darkest and the saturated to be towards the center, because that's where I want the eye to go. It's like an apple. It's so funny. I really like that. I didn't intend it when I drew it, but now I just can't live without it. I can't live living without you. What's that song? I can't live. One of my favorite parts of these Distiller illustrations is painting Uncle Matt's 5 o'clock shadow. You gotta do it in watercolor. It's like the most fun, because you just do like a blue wash over the skin color, and I love it so much. It looks so good, if I do say so myself. And then there should be touches of this in here, because like, you might be able to see some of the other finger, reflected in the bottle. Because the suit will be a dark color, it's okay if you go out of the lines here a little bit. It's totally fine. So I'm gonna do some dry brush. Yeah, and when you do dry brush, use a brush that obviously doesn't have a really strong tip because it will mess up the tip. So I would, use something that already has, it's jacked up a little bit, But you see the texture? It's really cool. It's really cool to add it, yeah, I'll just give it a little bit of texture. So. Is it time to paint the 5 o'clock shadow? Is it 5 o'clock? Basically, yeah, you just take some blue and you basically paint the beard on over the skin tone in blue. And then that'll dry and it'll look amazing. So there are a few more details I have to do throughout the piece, but I'm pretty much done now, so that's why I'm doing the dark over here, because like I said, I work light to dark. So, and then this tie I'll do, and it'll be dark, but it'll be a little bit lighter, so it'll stand out, over the pants. Yep, you see that? Cool. Yeah, I have a little bit more to do, but I think for the purpose of this video, we've shot enough. If you have any questions about anything I talked about, let me know. But yeah, if you do any watercolor, let me know. Mention me or send me a message or whatever, because I'd love to see. Okay, thank you all so much. Wishing you all good health and safety. Ta-ta.